Good evening and welcome to Barrington's White House. I'm Roland Potter. Welcome as we begin our third Thursday Spring 21 series, Art Night Out, chance to know about local Barrington, Lake Zurich area artists tonight. So, as always, we encourage you to take a look at our website, our brochure, and see what's coming up next, and also to acknowledge our many sponsors, donors, sustainers, individuals who have helped us during this past year and the months ahead. Frankie Johnson, longtime Lake Zurich artist. You're going to be very impressed with her huge collection, all of the things that she's painted over the years that she will show tonight. A lot of varied things to look at, a lot of artistry in her work. Very importantly, she is the director of the Art Center, Main Street Art Center in Lake Zurich. So please enjoy. She's a great contributor to our area, a tremendous teacher, and she has many, many students, young and old alike, in this area. So please enjoy Frankie Johnson.
Hi, I'm Frankie Johnson, and this is Main Street Art Center. This is a fine art school that I've been running since, about 28 years now. We had a 25th anniversary not long ago, and we're still going strong. So I just wanted to share the studio with you and share all the different things that we do here. We run children's and adult classes, teaching drawing, oil painting, watercolor, pastels, and we run several workshops each year with invited artists from around the country who teach their specialty. So we have a lot going on and a lot of fun. We just love this place. So I'm just going to give you a little tour around. This main classroom is where we do all of our main classes for adults and some of the teens. And the artwork that's up on the walls right now, some of it is projects from different class projects that we rotate, and some of the art is from instructors and the students. So, and the front windows are always rotated every 2 weeks with different student work. So they sign up for the window. They can get a few pieces in there. So we start out with drawing, charcoal drawing for the students in here. And they sit at benches here at the charcoal area, and they stay here about 8 weeks. And then before they start going into color and do color exercises and learn how to work paint. And we just help them through all the fundamentals and the basics and give them a good foundation in which to draw and paint from. So in the hallway, we have some artwork also from some of the well-known artists that we have gotten artwork from that we purchased. Kathy Wheeler and several down the hall you'll see. We have lots of artwork in this room as well. This is the room where the students can keep their palettes with all their paints. So if they do not want to take their stuff home, they don't have anywhere at home to keep their palettes or their paintings in progress, they can keep them here. And we have a cleanup room. They can clean brushes through here. So we sell art supplies. We sell all the paints, canvases, brushes, a variety of manufacturers. And here we do framing. We do ready-made frames for people, and we stock frames. So it's nice when students finish a painting, we try on lots of frames, and everybody helps them decide what looks the best. And they're great prices. So we sell a lot of frames. With more artwork throughout. Changes up and rotates. Then we have 2 smaller classrooms back here where all the kids have their classes. There are some adult classes back here as well. But We can, right now, normally we can do 8 kids in a class, but right now we're only doing 4 kids in each of these classrooms, so there's better spacing for them. But in better times, we have 8 in each of these 2 classes. So there'll be 4 in here also. This room gets torn down and little tables put up every Wednesday morning for watercolor class in both of these 2 rooms. Every year we print a new brochure that shows our lineup of all our workshop instructors, and registration for those workshops is always in the end of August, and it lists all of our classes and everything that's going on here pretty much. We also have an open studio in normal times. Right now it is on hold, so people can come and paint from the model, and that's on Monday nights. So this usually has a lot of our guest artists that are coming in on the front and their descriptions. Welcome to my home. We are just a couple of blocks away from the studio, so we're going to do a little walk through this main level and just share a few of the paintings that we have that are painted by different artists, as well as myself and my husband Jay. So, and then we'll go down to the lower level and to see my studio and see some more artwork down there. So. And then there's a couple of Jay's pieces on this side. Now, this is a mix of paintings from Jay and I. Jay likes to paint a lot of scenes from our vacations and places that we visit. So he's more the landscape guy, and I do a lot of the figures and portraits throughout. These there's 3 of these that are my paintings, and this is a friend, Romel Delator, a piece of his art that I've purchased. This is my grandson. I have done portraits of my grandsons and my children at different times, different ages. This is Kevin Bialfus, one of my favorite artists' work, and this is my daughter-in-law, and on the top, and this little scene is from China, as well as I had painted that in plein air when I was on a painting trip with 20 artists in China, probably 15 years ago, and the old Chinaman on this wall as well was from that trip, a man that we met on that trip that posed for us, and I finished painting that portrait once I was home. So these are some more paintings of Jay's along here. And some of these are very old pieces that are kind of just, the ones you just keep because they're history, part of history. There's some nice paintings. These are some of my favorite paintings. We always say that the bathroom is the best place to put your artwork because everybody goes and sees them in there. These are my pieces. This is another one of my grandson portraits, and just a mix of other pieces I've done. Here's another landscape of Jay's from one of our trips, our vacations as well. Some of these are plein air paintings, and some are from places we've been as well together. This was a neighbor girl of mine who used to model for me quite often. I've painted her many times in a lot of different ways. So we have a collection in here of artists too. This is really a mix of a lot of my favorite artists. In this wall we have a painting for Lee Radke and Kevin Balfus, John Lovett, who was from England. He came and did a workshop of watercolor. And Zhao Ming Wu from California, who's a Chinese artist, did great workshops for us. And these are just a little mix of also some workshop artists, Linda Kemp, a couple pieces of mine, and another one of my teachers' little mixed media pieces that I love. Well, welcome to the studio. This is my studio at home now. And this is where a lot of activity happens. I mean, I always have a lot of work going on, projects, plans for workshops and classroom. So there's a lot to see. So I have spaces set up for working on my watercolor pastel mixes. So I always have the table set up and ready to go. When I'm ready, and I don't have to come in and put it all out. It's already all there. So this is one of the pieces I just finished last night. These little watercolor pastels, which I have a big collection of them now, and they're quite fun. They don't take very long, maybe an hour and a half, and you can knock one out. And I love that because they're very playful for me. And kind of just relieve a lot of, expectations, because they're very surprising what happens with the end results. These are some of these are pieces that are ready for galleries to go in these boxes that are framed up, and these are a bunch of the watercolor pastels, a collection that I have of these that are ready for sale as well. All different, mostly, I was going to say all different topics or subjects, but most of them seem to be sort of animals, generally, or, nature things. So those are an interesting project because they start out in the watercolor as a really loose watercolor like this, and then all the detail work would be put in with the pastels really selectively. So I like it all to sort of flow together. I lose a lot of detail in the drawing this way, but now I can have a choice of which detail I want to pick up to finish this project. And here's another drawing ready to go, some flowers. And so I'll do 3 or 4 of these at once. The drawings, then I can come back and do the watercolor whenever I want to, let that dry, and I can come back next week and do the pastel work on top if I want. So I have them at different stages, and that makes it so easy to come and work whenever I want to. And it's not a big deal to set up. There's just a bunch of different finished paintings that are packed, kind of stacked up in here. Some are demonstrations, some are for projects when I do flower painting workshops. Some of these are plein air pieces that I have. Plein air painting outdoors. Many of them are painting in competitions that happen around the country, and you're competing against other artists for awards and such. So, and then even on some of our vacations that Jay and I go on, we'll take all our painting gear and do plein air when we can. So there's several of these. These landscapes are plein air, and these little pieces. The figuratives, they're a whole nother process and project with kind of really exploring abstract backgrounds and wild textures and try to create patterns that are interesting and then emerging a figure from them. And I really enjoy that process of just figuring things out. I have all kinds of little studies of these little figures and all over the place. I have stacks of paintings that are, some are finished, some are to go back to rework. Some of these are little studies, also demonstrations. This plein air, we did this as a project. Sometimes I'll take my classes outside at the studio. We'll go across the street to the park and set up tables, maybe 5 tables, and set up little flowers in vases so that we take all the easels over there, and that way I want them to have the experience of painting from life and from natural light outdoors, so they can feel the difference and sort of a different pressure they're working under because the light keeps changing. So they can't work on it for hours and hours because they only have about a 2-hour to get a painting finished. Some of these are just little plans, also little figure study plans. Sometimes I prepare these kind of backgrounds, these washy backgrounds, and then put flowers into them.
So something like this portraiture here,
Mm-hmm.
is that from a photograph?
This one is from a photo.
Do you
Yes.
do most of your portraits from photograph, or do you like to have a live person there to paint?
I would say probably 80% of it is from life, and then the rest from photos. If they're big pieces, they're done generally from a photo reference. This side has got a lot of my pastel. These 3 are just pastels, and the rest of these are all the mix of my watercolor and pastel together. And so that's what I mean about the abstract background in these washes and sort of the patterns and textures that are created. Surprisingly, you never know where they're going to end up and what they're going to do or how they affect your subject. And I like to incorporate as much of that initial pattern into my subject without burying it under the pastel. So my goal is to use as little pastel as possible to bring out some detail and let the rest be the watercolor textures. So I love that transparency of the watercolor with the opaqueness that you can get with the pastel. It's a nice complement each other. I call it a match made in heaven. That this is another little plein air piece, and I do a lot of these little figures just playing with backgrounds around them, patterns again. So here's a lot of studies on the floor of portrait things at different stages, or a lot of them sometimes are just exercises and projects exercises for some of my portrait workshops, or I have hundreds and hundreds of portraits. Here's some, these are from a different, like a project that we did, painting the figure without a drawing, just painting shape by shape by shape, just the shape of the face, the shape of the chest, the shape of the arm, the shape of the waist, the shape of the skirt. Just painting big blocks and then trimming them down and adjusting them, but getting that figure, in a different way, and then incorporating a little background to do the trimming with them, and talking about the background and why we mix different colors to help set her off. So these are some more projects, just getting ready for portrait workshops. So there's lots of ways I always try to think of how to work the head, because I show them a variety of ways to start. There's never just one way, or how to do different expressions, or how to start, not just from a drawing of the whole head, but sometimes it's just drawing features. Sometimes we just do features, and we'll have I'll have them just do a whole page of noses, eyes, and mouths. And sometimes we just do the small head studies because it's just a little less, it's a little easier actually just to do some small ones. Sometimes I'll just work monochromatically in just one color, but maybe we'll play with edges more, losing edges. How much of the face can we lose? How do we just get a pattern of how the values will fall on in that little composition? So this is just full of all kinds of head studies. There's just hundreds of them. And these are all like 2-hour studies, 2 hours or 2.5 hours. And it's just such great practice. We get all kinds of good models that come in.
And so what kind of material is this?
This is, it's just canvas that's on a roll. Like I'll buy a big roll, like 54 inches by 6 yards, and I just cut it up into pieces for these because it's great to work on for all these practices. It's very economically useful because otherwise, and it takes up so little space compared to like boards. If we're doing boards on everything, I would never be able to fit them all in my house. So this, and I also, since I do so much painting and projects, it's just easier to put all these on less expensive. Sometimes we do a Christmas project. I mean, every year we do a Christmas holiday project, and I try to do something different every year with the students, and I surprise them with what we're going to do. So they're always nervous. They don't know what the heck I'm going to pull out this year. So this is just one of the projects a couple years ago, palette knife painting. And we just set up Christmas still lifes all around the room, and they had to just have 2 hours to really learn how to use that palette knife. And it was a lot of fun. It teaches something, most of the stuff they would not even ever try otherwise. So this is another project that I usually have them do in the spring, is just do a bunch of little landscape studies. I ask them to take a month, and every time they come to class that they would do, and usually these are about an hour. I say just give me an hour study of getting the most important information down and keep it simple and fresh and uncluttered. So they learn a lot about editing and what's important and what isn't, what they can leave out. Are they getting the mood of the day, the lighting? Are they getting too much detail in? Are they making it more cluttery? Sometimes we just do building studies and how to surround them with the right values to set them off interestingly, or how to select colors. So yeah, I probably have about 100 of these little studies, these little landscape practices, and they're great every springtime. So we've had Carolyn Anderson, who's a well-known artist around the country, has come, and she does portraits in a different way. Now this is my piece, but kind of her way of doing it, sort of dry brushing, and so I usually sit in on most of those workshops as well to learn myself. So I always have something to share with the students. Here's another one, just a little figures, just doing a practice of little shapes without faces, so they just really look for the shapes of the bodies. And I wanted to just show this one we've also done shapes with just little tiny faces. How to do portraits of little tiny people, and just practice a lot of things like that. And then just regular head studies. So a lot of these are finished pieces back in here, framed up. There's all kinds, mostly my pieces, some of Jay's, but they're ready for galleries. I belong to 2 galleries, one in Door County at the Fine Line which is in Allison Bay, or Ephraim, I should say, Ephraim. And one in Indiana, Fort Wayne, Indiana, is the Castle Gallery. So every spring, I'll take maybe a dozen paintings up to each of these places, trade out some from last year that maybe didn't sell, and give them always new work. This year's Christmas project, this year I had my students, it was a 2-week project, and I didn't tell them exactly what we were doing, but we were working on these gesso panel boards, which are real slippery, and I wanted them to do an abstract painting the first week. They could use 2 or 3 colors of whatever their choice was, and create some splashes and drips and textures. Whatever they wanted, whatever they could come up with. They could just use black and white if they wanted. And they're like, well, what are we going to do with these things? So the next week when they came back, and their paintings were dry, I laid out on a table a lot of photographs of birds and told them they had to fit these birds into the background and make them feel like they would belong to that background, that they were emerging from it. So they may have had to, change colors on their birds a little bit or lose edges. So it was really interesting. And these are some of the samples I brought in as well for them to see. So this was a bird I incorporated into this crazy background, and just sort of camouflaged in there, but he feels like he sort of belongs there. This was a crazy background, and I put this little bird in there. Lots of textures. Tried to keep some of the textured background coming through the bird as well. This kind of a funny little guy. I thought, what am I going to do with that background? But it was fun. As I was doing samples ahead, I really enjoyed it because you just didn't know what you were going to get. And it was quite fun. So I think they really enjoyed the project too. So this is another one. Along that line, I had, well, you just saw some of those crazy backgrounds that are just blank still. Here's a few others. But I wanted to try pulling a figure out of one of those backgrounds. And so I decided to use this figure. And this was just a shape by shape painting. So there was no drawing of her on top of this background, but I just masked in her head, her shoulders, her blouse, her skirt, then her arms, and tried to soften edges and give it a little extra character, and trying to use some of this crazy pattern that was underneath here to just let it incorporate into the skirt just to see what would happen. And it's kind of interesting. So I was going to try her again on, let's see, one of these other backgrounds that I just had out. I think I'm going to try her on this one next and see what happens. I thought I might do a demo of that today, but I wasn't sure if I'd have time. So I'm going to try her again on this. So we just have a few minutes, but I thought I could at least show you a little bit about how I would start putting this model into this crazy background and see how we can incorporate her and just get these shapes down that I was talking about. So I am going to get her head, start at the head first, the top of her head. Just get some kind of little shape on that and kind of leave a little fuzzy edges and get a little flesh color for the face part and look at the shape of that. Kind of a straighter line on down the front. And I'll look at this little face shape. Bring it on down her neck. Get a little bit of the flesh on her shoulders shaped in here. I'm looking at the shape of this as a sort of a box that's very rectangular, kind of angled. I'm going to get a little bit of extra shadow up above in her hair and neck. On her shoulder. Get a little down the front of her face. Get a hint of her little blouse. Use some little different blues in the whites of a little cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, just to gray it up a little for shadow to start it. Look at the way her arm sort of jets out. I'm trying to just leave it a little bit open with some colors coming through, just to see what I want to end up using, actually. Looking for the little flare of her arms. I put this arm in last, after I just get some of the bigger shapes in first. I'll get a little bit of the darkness that sort of happens under her blouse in here and before her skirt. I was thinking to change her skirt, possibly her skirt color, to maybe even a red, but I don't know how brave I am today. So maybe I'll just stay with the blue, the turquoise. I don't know. I'm not sure that that's going to work so well. Maybe I will switch it up. Maybe I'll start it with a sort of a duller red, burnt sienna, and get a little hint of her skirt. It just might go better with this whole background. Just going to mass out, her main form. Just dripping in a little bit over what's there already. And then I can always pump it up with some more red and raw sienna. Put a little raw sienna out there. Her leg is really, really out there. And I'm just dragging that brush. So I don't want to get too tight of edges on any of these strokes. I'll just leave my options open. If I get too much color, I can just wipe it down. Maybe I'll go a little more cad red now, maybe a little cad orange with it, and get a little bright spot up here by her lap. Just see what that does. Get some little accent marks. Just let some. So a little dry brushing for some of that fabric. So now I have the gist of the main part of her body. So I can just slip on a little arm out here, just a little hint of what her hand is going to do, where it's laying, I should say, without fussing, and where the next arm sort of comes in. Just up to her chest a little. Just a shape where it's kind of coming out of the sleeve. So once I have its position, I can still adjust like the shadow from her arm. Getting a little roundness to it. And I'm going to get some more shadows in the blouse right now, too. Give her a little more form. So I always keep going back to the shadows. Some nice shadows in her lower part of her blouse. We want to get some at at her arms. Still trying to hang on to some little pieces of the background to come through, just again, just for sort of the fun of it. We're getting her blouse. So then I would come back. I'd leave maybe I'll just get a little shadow under her hand, just so we see where her hand is laying on her chest. So we just see at least the underside of it for now. And we'll make it just a little bit lighter on the top of her hand so it's not the same value as her shoulder. Then so I can leave that for a little bit and just go back to some of the little fussier things in her hair and get some a few nice little strokes that are maybe loose and wispy. I can pull a little of the dark from up above, get some dark underneath her hair. I can get some really strong highlight on top of that. Make her really blondie, shiny. I like to be sort of playful with the hair. If it's too edgy, I just wisp it away or make it bigger, or make it more angular, whatever it needs to be a little more interesting. So I really like playing with shapes. I always tell my students, don't ever leave a shape on your canvas that you don't like. Don't just, look at every shape like you really are okay with it. Shapes, they need to recognize shapes all the time. So pull out a little bit more light here in her jaw. And, you can play with corners and edges for a while and just slowly build up the detail. But these are the big pieces, the big information to get started, the most important pieces to focus on, the big stuff and what the light and shadows are doing. Get good at recognizing that, seeing those parts, and then take your time selecting the detail you want to add into that painting to finish it off. And what's the best things to set it off in the most interesting way. So that's it for today.